everybody, and welcome back to Growing in the Cove. My name is Stacy and I garden in Zone 5B, Newfoundland. So today I'm going to bring you along with me while I propagate some plants. This is a great time of year to start taking some cuttings of plants that you already have in the garden, and there's lots of time for them to grow on and get established, and you can get them back out into the garden later on in the season. So my first time trying this was last year, where I kind of had a big experiment to see what would root for me, and I did have a lot of successes. So I'm going to repeat some of that today. I'm probably going to try some new things as well, but essentially you can go from having a few pieces of a perennial that you have in your garden and essentially stick it in a pot, and a lot of plants will just root on their own. So this is a sedum that I took cuttings of actually last year, and now it's got, let's see if I can get this out. And now it's got a very established root system, if you can see all the roots in there. So this is a really economical way to take plants that you have in your garden and make more of them. Although I buy lots of new plants for my garden, probably more than I should, I always feel good when I'm able to replicate what I have. And another big principle that I use in my garden is I like to repeat the same plants again and again and again, because I love the continuity and it just looks so good. So if you're interested to see how I take cuttings of plants to make new plants, please keep watching. So first of all, I just want to talk about some of the plants that I've had success with, and some plants that are easy starter plants. To begin, there's nothing simpler than rooting a sedum. There's the very popular Autumn Joy. That's not what this one is, it's a different one. The flowers are not as pretty as the kind of pinky red Autumn Joy. These are more of a light pink that age to like an antique pink. But a sedum is super easy, and in fact it is so easy that you could literally cut off a piece of this plant and just stick it in the ground next to a pre-existing plant or somewhere else in your garden, and it will root. These are the simplest, and this is a great way to kind of get your confidence up for propagating plants by cuttings. So I had really good success with sedums. I'm not even sure if I've ever lost a cutting. Another plant that I had success with was heuchera, and I actually propagated a lot of heucheras last year. Of course, the plants are very tiny when you start them by cutting, so it's going to take a few years for them to come into maturity, but I have now spread purple Pallas or Pallas purple heucheras all throughout my garden. I'm going to show you how to do that today. Catmint, if you have nepeta or catmint in your garden, that is a really easy one to root. Pretty much anything in the mint family, so you can actually do, if you're trying to give mint cuttings to somebody, like the herb mint, then you could do that. You can do catmint. I've also done geranium. Hardy geranium is an easy one to do by cuttings. Also the annual geranium pelargoniums are another good idea. You can also take cuttings of tall garden phlox is another good one. And those are the main ones that I have tried, but if you search online, there are a lot of resources telling you the types of plants that you can take via cuttings. This also extends into shrubs and that kind of thing, but when you're getting into plants that are more of a hardwood or a softwood cutting, that can be a little bit more complicated. But these herbaceous cuttings are a great way to dip your toe in propagating. So here is an experiment I did this year. These are cosmos. So when I went to pinch my cosmo plants, which I always do to make them get bushy, I actually took the tops that I pinched and I stuck them in a pot. And I put them under grow lights, under a humidity dome for probably about a month. And they actually have rooted. They looked really bad for a couple of weeks and I thought for sure I lost them all. But I now have a fresh little batch of cosmos to go out in my garden, which is great because I actually feel like I didn't quite grow enough for all of the bare places I wanted to fill in the garden. So cosmos are another one you could do. This also applies to dahlias. You can do as well. When you pinch the top of your dahlias, you can then root it in a pot. So honestly, the options are endless for this, but I'm just going to bring you along while I do a few cuttings today. And yeah, let's go. So here are some very mature Pallas purple heucheras. I apologize for any of the traffic noises in the back. There's a construction zone literally right next to me. But these are some mature Pallas purple heucheras, which I propagated from these plants yesterday. So I'm going to bring you in closer and show you how we take some cuttings to propagate. Okay, so this is not the best light for filming, but if you look at the base of a heuchera plant, you can see that there are little tiny kind of clumps of mini plants that you'll see a few stems bunched together. So what I do is usually I will take these from around the sides so it's less noticeable. So right here you can see this almost looks like a baby plant on its own right here. So what I will do is I will go right to the crown of the plant and snip. And this is what I use for my cutting. You can see there's a little bit of the crown of the plant, but this is what I will end up using. So I will probably take a couple of these. Let's try again. Here's another one right here. You can see there's lots of weeds here too. But here is another one that almost looks like a baby plant all on its own, and I will go right to the bottom where it meets the crown of the plant and make the cut. And this is what it looks like. You can see there's some old dead leaves attached, but this is what your cutting is going to look like for the heuchera. Here we have a catmint. This is even simpler to take a cutting from. So I'm going to take a piece, hold on, let me put you down lower. Because I don't want to take away from the aesthetic of the plant, I'm actually going to take a cutting from this bottom portion, and usually that's what I'll do. So I will just cut a stem off, and I will be able to get multiple cuttings out of this one plant. And a cool thing about plants in the mint family is that they actually have a square stem. So if you try to roll them between your fingers, it's square, which is very cool. So that's all you need to make a catmint cutting. Next up, we have some sedums. These are the same sedums I took cuttings from last year. Ideally, you don't want to take any stems that are actually going to flower, but I will probably just cut those off. So all you need to do to take your cutting is select whatever you like, and that is literally all you need to root sedum. So if I were trying to make a little clump like the pot I showed you earlier, I would take a couple of these cuttings to stick in a pot. It's also an option if you wanted, and I have done this with sedums before, is that you could just strip off some of the bottom leaves, make a hole with a pencil or something, and then stick the sedum down into the ground, keep it watered, and that will root. I mean, these are the easiest thing that you could do. Here is a hardy geranium that I've also successfully propagated using this method. This is called Biocovo, but basically all I did for these cuttings is, let me bring you in a little bit closer here. If you look into the inside of the plant, you can see that there's almost little clumps that are clumped together. Like here's a clump, here's another clump. So what I do is snip off one of these little clumps, and you will have a little piece of sort of the root, more like the crown of the plant. So that is a cutting, and that is another cutting. Okay, so let's get to potting these up. Okay, so now we've got our cuttings. I have pre-filled some pots with pre-moistened potting mix. This is just all-purpose potting mix. So what I do use to help out is I like to use a rooting powder. You can get any brand. This isn't totally necessary, and lots of people do root things without it, but I do find this helps. You don't want to get this on your skin. A lot of people say to wear gloves when you use it. I'm just going to try and be careful. So let's start with the heuchera. So here is my heuchera cutting, and because it has no roots, it has nothing to feed the plant. So even though it feels cruel to do this, all of these large leaves you're going to want to remove because they will die, and it will reduce the likelihood that your plant will survive. So actually what I'm going to do is cut off all of the leaves except for these 3 little leaves. So I'm going to cut off all of this dead stuff at the bottom. This is just the remnants of dead leaves. And what I did last year, if I recall correctly, is I kind of peeled back, and I don't even know if this is necessary, but I kind of peeled back some of this hard layer. Like so. So this is the cutting. So what I did was I made a hole with a pencil, take my rooting hormone, my cutting, stick it in and tap off excess so you can see it's kind of covered in this pink powder, and that's why we make the hole beforehand to stick it in. And I like to have it at the level of the soil, so that's the point where the leaves are coming out. So that's our heuchera cutting, and firm it in really good. This is a good time to label what your cuttings are as well, because sometimes you may forget. So that is a heuchera cutting. So again, I'm going to cut off the big leaves. Okay, so I make a hole with the pencil. I've dipped my cutting into the rooting hormone, and I stick it in, and then I firm in around like so, just where the leaves come out. So 2 heuchera cuttings done. Now we've got the sedum. Now with one sedum plant, you can actually make multiple cuttings. So earlier in the garden, I stripped off these bottom leaves. So where these leaves have been stripped off is actually where roots are going to grow. So what you could do is leave a couple of leaves on top and cut. And that is my first cutting. Once again, I'm going to take my sedum cutting and I'm going to dip it in the rooting hormone. Now these root so easily, this honestly isn't even necessary. I'm going to put this in a little pot. So I'm going to make a hole, take my cutting and stick it down in the soil and firm it in. And there is a sedum cutting, and that will root. So the cool thing about these is that you could keep going up the stem. I'll remove these lower leaves. So roots will come out of there. So what you could also do is cut again, and this is another cutting. So let's keep these in the same pot. So let's do this one in the corner. Once again with the powder, put it in and firm. And then again, these are amazing plants. We'll strip off these 2 bottom leaves. I'll probably leave a couple on top. I'll leave 3 on top. I'll dip and make a hole. Firm it in. And then at the very top, I definitely would not leave this flower on there. I will snip the flower off. Strip the leaves. And then firm in. The nice thing about putting these around the corner or around the sides of the pot, and a lot of people will only do their cuttings on the side, is that if you want to check to see if you have roots, you can kind of slide it out, the whole thing out of the pot easily to check to see if there's roots down the side. Some people also say that the contact with the flat surface will actually make the roots, I don't know, develop more strongly and they'll go straight down. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's out of that one piece of sedum, that's 4 cuttings. And again, this isn't foolproof, so if you really want to root something, then take more cuttings than you need because you're probably going to lose a few. And then we have the catmint. So this is another one that you could make multiple cuttings out of. So what we do is remove the leaves, and this is where roots are actually going to come out. And we will snip right above a set of leaves. That's a cutting. We'll make a hole in the pot in the corner here. Dip in. I always try to cover the place where the leaves were with the rooting hormone. And there we go. That's a catmint cutting. And then again, now what some people will also do, we'll take off the leaves, is that these leaves are going to wilt and droop because this is a lot for the plant to keep, keep hydrated when it literally doesn't even have a root system. So with a large leaf, I know this looks barbaric, but cut it in half so it's less for this cutting to try and keep hydrated. So there we've got another cutting. I'll put a hole in the soil and firm in. And then one thing with the catmint is that I really find that they do tend to wilt at the beginning. So if they look really bad for a week or so, don't worry because they do root really easily. So once again, I think we will do, I will go just above 2 leaves. And then we'll rip off these bottom leaves. This is where our roots are going to form. We'll dip. And pop it in the soil. Make sure you've got good contact with the soil. Again, these leaves are way too big. We're going to cut them off so it's less stress on the plant. So there we go. There are some catmint cuttings. Lastly is geranium cuttings, and hardy geraniums are notoriously easy to root. You don't even need to go through a lot of trouble for these. You could just stick these in a pot and just keep it watered, keep it outside, and it would do fine. But I'm going to put them with the rest of my other cuttings just to keep them all together. So you can see this one has a flower. I don't want this wasting any energy on a flower. That's gone. Also, this has way too many leaves for it to sustain. So I'm going to cut off all these large leaves. And these dying leaves are not serving any purpose, so they're gone. So I am left with 2 leaves. So what I'm gonna do is take this whole piece, which doesn't even need rooting hormone because these really do really well, but I'm going to dip it just because, and I'm gonna make a hole. Because this root's kind of big, I'm making a bigger hole, and I'm gonna pop it in. And I'm just gonna leave the crown of where the leaves will emerge just at the top, so new leaves won't have any issues coming through. So there's a hardy geranium cutting, nothing to it. While I was in the garden, I also took this phlox cutting. So I'm gonna strip off the leaves once again. So you can see here is a node where leaves were connected, and here where they attach to the main stem. So I'm also going to cut these leaves off as well. So that's a phlox cutting. We're going to make a hole, dip, and stick down in the soil. There we go. Okay, so all of the cuttings are situated. I'm going to put them on this shelf in my greenhouse. This is actually not a super bright area, and in the past I have actually laid these on the floor in a shadier area of the greenhouse. So if this gets too bright, I may need to move them, but it's really important that you have something on top to hold in the humidity. Remember, they do not have roots, so keeping these leaves hydrated is going to be really difficult for these little cuttings. So what some people will do is put a bag with a few holes in it over their cuttings. And what I'll do is I'll keep these misted and keep checking on them, keep them moist. And in a couple of weeks, we should have some baby plants that are ready to go. Just a reminder again with the sedums and even with the hardy geranium that you could just stick these in a pot outside, and as long as you keep them watered and tended to, they don't even need this much babying, I guess. So that is propagating plants. This makes me feel like such an expert gardener, even though it is so simple and it takes so little time. It's well worth the effort, and it's a great way to make more plants with what you have and save yourself some money, or even make some plants for your friends or families who are trying to build a garden. So that concludes today's video on propagating plants. It's actually starting to get really overcast, and that would be a more ideal time to take cuttings. Taking them on a hot day in the hot sun, the leaves are a little more parched and the cuttings are more stressed. So really, doing this on a cool day or after a rain, early in the morning, late at night would be a more ideal time to do cuttings. But if you're anything like me, I'm the type of gardener that does things when it's convenient for me and when I have the time. I don't always have the time to go out at ideal times, so I make it work and I make it happen. However, if you are looking to optimize this process, those are some tips that I would recommend. By no means am I a propagation wizard, and I am new to this, but if you do have any questions, please let me know, and I will do my best to help you out. Thank you so much for everyone who's been watching my videos. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to help me out, you can hit the subscribe button. If you'd like to be notified when I make new content, you can hit like on this button on this video, or you can leave me a comment down below. Again, I've really been enjoying everyone who's been leaving me such great, insightful comments. So I hope everything is going great with your garden this year, and everything is growing super fast at this time now that we're into summer. And until next time, bye.